Guys, I forgot to put this in the video that's coming up. The video is a full video coming up. It's not just telling you about free voice. Full video coming up if you want to stick with me. But I forgot to mention Howdy McCoskey. We have Howdy McCoskey and are thrilled to have him doing videos over at Free Voice now. And we probably will get a few more folks at Free Voice. Thanks a lot. Hey guys, it's Matt. Um, this video is very important. I'm going to revisit per a video Jerry sent me yesterday. We really need to revisit the major elements of what happened in 1918 with Spanish flu, and I'll try to do a little bit more research on it, revisit some of the research I did when I presented that video about a year ago. Yes, I want to let you know that the part two analysis of the creepy video is now on Free Voice, and that's .io, not .com. It's there now, but this is a full video, and this topic is far more important than breaking down and having fun with the creepy back-end analysis of whatever they're presenting on that in that documentary, which I hope you'll go to. I spent a lot of time on it, and I think it came out well, the part two. So this is about the major elements of what happened in 1918. And as of now, there aren't any parallels between what happened then and what happened now. But the real scary thing is, are they trying to create parallels? Are they trying to recreate the way, this is how they kind of tend to do business. Are they trying to recreate that in some way? How everything in this reality repeats, the themes repeat over and over and over again. But let's just not go down the road too far. And this will take about 10 minutes at least, and I need to do another full video on this. This will be about the major elements just to keep on the table in analyzing what happened in 1918. And again, I'll mention at the end, but the part two on 910, that documentary analysis on freevoice.io. Now, in 1918, it was presented to the world as a V, of course, as it's presented now. I'm not going to get into what exactly that is, what your theory on that is, germ theory. It's really not even relevant for the purpose of this conversation. It's presented to the world as a V, but the very strange thing about 1918 was it was a bacteria that led to a pneumonia that created 95% or more of the deaths. So let me back up actually before I get into that aspect. I believe that what the history that's presented to us about 1918, about 50 million dead worldwide, the Spanish flu, I believe it's absolutely real because my great grandfather died from it. There's just too many times it's come up in family conversations. The grandfather I was most closest to or closest to stayed at his house with my grandmother hundreds and hundreds of times. It was his father in Philadelphia my great grandfather that died of Spanish flu, and that led to my grandfather having to go into a boys' home. He got very lucky. Probably the best boys' home to go into at the time was Girard College in West Philadelphia. So of course I've heard the story maybe 100 times about why I called him Granddad when he was alive, had to go into Girard College because his father died of Spanish flu, and Philadelphia was one of the places hit the hardest. So I believe the 50 million number because I have a story that's right in the family about it. Um, and it what happened, they didn't give me, I don't remember asking for, I never asked for as a kid, details exactly how quickly did he die, what were his symptoms. I didn't, of course, but it was just like kind of the history presents it. It just boom, Spanish, and he was dead. Okay, so if you put all the elements of Spanish flu on the table, which we need to do and keep doing, revisit and we don't want to draw parallels between what is playing out now because right now there aren't any. We'll try to we'll look now, but you don't want parallels, put it that way. But are the creeps trying to create parallels? That's what's scary. So you have, let's just start with the basics. You have something presented to the world as a V, okay? But you have like a tag team approach, a bacteria, which is completely different organism, completely different pathogen, caused all the pneumonia deaths. So you have that. That's, I mean, I'm no doctor, scientist, or researcher, but that's strange. They typically don't tag team up, but maybe that is more common than I think. But it was the bacteria that killed everybody. Okay, so you have that. You have World War One. Now, of course, that major 800-pound gorilla in the room, if you're going to analyze what played out in 1918, you have to put the World War One puzzle piece. Of course, it was a factor, even if it was just the strange the V or Jacksonation cocktails that they cooked up, or tried to cook up, and unsuccessfully cooked up, or maybe from their perspective successfully cooked up for the soldiers before they sent them out to the trenches. World War One is a factor, if nothing other than a spreader factor. But there's a problem with that, which I'll get to. But let's just look at the basic elements for now. You have what it is, Spanish flu, a V. You have the bacteria, which was the real problem, the pneumonia. You have World War One. Okay. Now, what are the other elements? And make sure we're not missing any elements before we continue the conversation. There's an aspirin element, a puzzle piece that you have to put up on the table. When I did um, the initial research was with or old footage from the 70s and 80s, I believe, of very old people that lived through it as kids. And several of them, one person in particularly, but there was a correlation where they kept talking about there was a new wonder drug. It was relatively new, of course, introduced, I think, exclusively by the very friendly German company without any history at all. This company has no history of anything nefarious. Bayer, Bayer. Of course, everybody over age 40 you grew up as Bayer aspirin. That's all I remember in the stores as a kid. We didn't have all these generics and different things like that. It was Bayer aspirin. So the aspirin was a factor, absolutely, in the testimonials at least. And I don't know in terms of any real hardcore research on 1918 if they bring aspirin in as a factor. But to me, it's a factor, almost like if you, I'm basically alluding to the way these old people talked. If you didn't take it, you were better off. Now, I don't, again, this is beyond my pay grade. I just, if you're going to analyze 1918, put that chip up there. It might mean some aspirin in some way came into play. Another factor that makes no sense, excuse me. By the way, guys, when I do this, I think if you anybody, Pam got a free T-shirt when she got a bottle of vodka. It was a Mongolian bottle of vodka. This is called Galia, means Goliath, I think. The last time I wore this shirt, I said it was a Polish vodka. It was a Mongolian vodka that the Pennsylvania State Liquor Store was giving away when she bought this. Um, Not really relevant to this important conversation. The other element was the range of people that died in 1918. It was a very strange range. Basically, the people that shouldn't have died, the most healthies, should not have died. You have young children with a very, very, very low mortality rate, and you actually have over age 50 and over age 60 with a low mortality rate. You have, and this is exactly what happened to my great grandfather. You have 20 through 35-year-olds, most that dying in the 80th to 90 percentile. This is just makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense to the scientists that study it. The scientists that study it say that the children were so resilient that they were able to overcome almost anything. But the older people overcame it because they had been exposed to a similar, whatever they labeled H1 and whatever. But they were exposed. The old people, they said, oh, it looks like that. Now, how would they even know? How would they know? But they said the old people were exposed to something very similar, so their immune systems learned. And when the Spanish flu came and somebody like my great grandfather was 28 or whatever he was, I think he was right around 30 when he died. They had never ever their bodies had never seen the strain, and this was the nasty of nasties. So they all died in that range. It's very easily explained away from a scientist perspective, or a doctor would accept this without any question. But on the face of it, it's very odd that your people, that your 28-year-old guy or girl, That's pretty darn healthy at the prime. And so you have to incorporate the other factors, one of which could be aspirin. So back to the World War One um, puzzle piece, guys. It's such an 800-pound gorilla. Of course, it has to be a factor in many, many different ways. Now, do you remember the video I made? I mean, this absolutely has to be part of the analysis. Remember the video I made um, about a year ago where a very old man was being interviewed, and I guess he was in his 90s when he was being interviewed, and it was a very amateurish interview, just some, I don't know, like some. I mean, there was nothing. It wasn't like 60 Minutes or anything like presented through them. It was just some guy doing interviews. It was all grainy, hard to read, hard to hear. He says that, and I don't even want to talk about that. He says the name of his ship is when he was going over to Europe for World War One, and I don't know, say 250 on board the ship, 200 soldiers, quote, sailing over to Europe for World War One. The reason I made the video originally, he says that the name of the ship was the HMS. Yeah, I guess it would be for a British ship, though this was an American troops, British ship, HMS C. It's the name of the beer and the name of the exact thing we're going through now. He says that's the name of his ship. But this isn't even relevant to what we're talking about now. This is just a creepy conspiracy, coincidence, synchronicity, whatever. Excuse me. Um, Long-haired cats. Stuff just flies everywhere. Um, but when you look into it, it was actually called the only thing I could find was the HMS Caronia. Caronia was the name of the ship, but he just called it, like the name of the beer when he interviewed. It was very strange that, what a coincidence. That's the name of his ship, or he calls it what's going on now without any. There was no. He didn't say Caronia at all. He said just the name, beer. But anyway, the point is how, let's say 250 on his ship going over troops. Um, about 100, if I remember correctly, died. 100 I mean, the whole half or two-thirds of the ship got very, very ill. High, 103, 104, 105 fever. About 100, he said, died. He talks about just laying up on cots, and of course, this it was evidence like that. Of course, that and it probably should lead researchers back there to the whatever Franken mosquito cocktail they cooked up for any Jackson nation that they cooked up, whatever they shot in the arms of these soldiers. You know, I'm a pretty big cause and effect guy. If 100 soldiers die and most of the boat's completely ill, then did they all contract it at the same time, or what was it? What was put in their arm? Obviously, it's pretty clear cause and effect in this regard. But that's worth noting how many tons of these sailors, or not sailors, these were army men being taken over by the Navy, and the British Navy got sick and died. But here's what's very strange, guys, and I was thinking about this yesterday for the first time. Okay, now whatever they say, even if we have that one account, it's so horrific. I mean, the whole ship getting sick, 100 or so dead. I mean, so they're whatever caused it, we call Spanish flu. Then if they're taking that with them over there to the trenches or to the front lines, then with those horrible conditions, then you would think 80% of them would just go down to this illness. See, this doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm not sure anybody's ever really tried to bridge this together. You have basically, I'm not saying this properly, so it's always good to back up to the absolute basics. I'm saying that every single account of what we see trench warfare, even in movies, include 12 Monkeys, include Wonder Woman, there's hundreds of movies that have touched on World War One, and every single one of them, if you went to the director, producer, whatever, they say, well, we tried to do our research and be as historically accurate as possible. Maybe not Wonder Woman, but you know what I mean. So where's the account, even if it's in a TV show, a PBS documentary, a Ken Burns, a where's the account of tens of thousands of them at the front lines being so sick and dying from we hear about the bad conditions and the trench warfare, but see what I'm saying? If it was so bad that 100 died on the ship coming over, and most of the ship is 105-degree fever, and whatever they cooked up in the Franken cocktails in their Jacksonation efforts from Fort, I don't know, whatever fort they were on the East Coast, that you can kind of do the research and see this is where the first Franken juice cocktails were cooked up, Jacksonations. Well, then if this created it and it created something that was potentially spreadable, then you would have they're then taking it into the worst conditions of all time because of those horrible conditions of the front lines. I'm sure the whole everybody wasn't in a muddy trench, but we see a lot of that, whether it be a documentary, a book, or they even have World War One in color now. They have World War One with the HD video because they take the old video and they put it through a supercomputer. You don't see just half the people sick and dead, and you don't hear any. There are I don't want to say no accounts of this because I haven't researched it, but you know what I mean, guys. If the guy's talking about a ship where potentially the whole ship could have died, it was then where's the accounts of you'd have something in history or something we would know about, and if it exists, guys, I'm sorry, I didn't. You would think we would have known about this if we just without even doing any research. Where, oh, do you remember when the Spanish hit the front lines and 30% of the entire armies of certain armies were just wiped out in a month? I mean, you don't hear anything like that. How's that? You hear, okay, they're sick going over. See, there's one theory that's coming into my head, and ugh, I don't, hopefully, well, I don't know how wrong or correct it could be. I guess I'll just present it, but it's not good. They You had this incredible illness going over on the ships based on maybe the Frankenjuice cocktails. Then you have World War One. Again, you don't have mass death and sickness from this, from what we're talking about. You have more of an issue like when they come home, they bring it home. Well, they were in trenches and mud, slept in mud. Where's the mass? Okay, I've said enough. You know what I mean. There should be a whole history of that doesn't seem to exist. So they bring it home and spread. So originally I was thinking when I was originally doing my research on this that this horrible the World War One puzzle piece might be whatever this horrible bacteria strain that camped on could have been created in the horrible conditions of the trench warfare. And then they brought the bacteria back, and then it was almost like you needed those horrible conditions of World War One to create a Franken bacteria strain that was just would knock you on your ass and kill you. So that maybe that's the how World War One came into play. But I don't know, guys. However, as of right now, this has been, mostly what's going on now has mostly been a psychological trauma on the masses. Get them to submit to make more contract with it, to go along with what authority says. But you hope in terms of if I'm trying to figure out what happened in 1918 and using these major puzzle pieces, and you're trying to figure out what happened, you hope they know what happened. All right, that's the problem. They know what happened, and hopefully they don't want to recreate it. If you see what I mean. But anyway, it got me thinking what Jerry sent about this. And then one other thing, guys, about well, in terms of what he sent me, I will mention it briefly. Um, Most of the quote truth or whatever of what I'm maybe talking about here, or of what potentially went down in 1918. This video, was mostly presenting truth. Talked about the Franken mosquito cocktail that the army bases cooked up before the soldiers went. But to me, it was a system production. It was of the system. In some way it was a manipulation, mostly presenting truth, where something was in there that it wanted truthers to propagate. There was a British accent in the presentation. It was too professional, its presentation. There was mood music. And I don't even think I would even mention it, but every time it showed a picture of 1918, and this is my own personal opinion about this, but I do believe this. Every time it showed a picture of whatever, people riding a bus or doctors or anything in 1918 regarding the Spanish, it showed everyone in a mask, every single person in every single picture that they said was from 1918 in this. And I don't buy that at all. I think those images are faked. I really do. um, it just seems like I researched hardcore 1918 Spanish flu before this thing came, but I'm glad I researched it kind of when I did, because what we see, it's very strange, the buttons and levers that they pull. I would say many of you that did this sort of research would probably agree with me that you saw some masks when you did, but it seems like every time you go back and look at 1918, there's more and more images of just all mask, all mask. I don't buy it. I, of course, yeah, I'm saying these images are faked. I don't buy it. I don't, there's just, it was a whole different mentality of person that lived back then. You didn't have, you didn't even have anything presented to the population back then like N95 or something that would be safe. You you might have had some people sewing some socks and underwear or whatever, or cloth, or a white cloth or a white cotton into a mask, but it would have been extremely hard to mass produce. You wouldn't have, you know, I'm going to say the tough men or whatever, the tough people, they just wouldn't have flocked to it the way they do now. So you see these documentaries where they're all, and if it's nurses treating the sick of 1918, okay, fine. If you're in a ward, I of course, but you see these images now of all these people riding solid trolleys, subways, just people at baseball games or whatever, and all in masks. I don't buy it for a second. I believe it's 100% faked. And if it's not, it's a retrocausality or some kind. I don't buy that they did that. You know. Anyway, I don't want to get too conspiratorial because then you're going to go to retrocausality stuff. That gets real weird real quick for a lot of people. But don't buy it. Sure, I'm sure some people thought that might protect. But you city block. They show you image now like everybody's in a mask. No. And then pictures of what it. Remember, I looked at an image where there's an image of where they showed like somebody's being like scolded or yelled at, like you can't ever. There's a trolley car and two people are getting on and off whatever with their mask, 1918, all black and white, but one guy doesn't have his, so the message says person being told you can't come on. No way, no way. They didn't do that back then. They didn't even understand. No way, no way. All these mask pictures from 1918, fake. I say that real definitive, like I know what I'm doing or talking about. It's just what I feel. No way. Um, System generated. So, guys, the key is, and I don't, this is ugly, man, but to see is the parallels would there be, because this was real in 1918, right? My great grandfather died. No matter what cocktail or whatever was put together, even if you maybe even the aspirin was a catalyst. Could have been. I mean, it was considered the wonder drug. Just came out 5 or 8 or so 10 years before the wonder drug. They took it for everything. It would have been that population range of 25 to 35 that would have been most accepting of aspirin. It could have been the catalyst. Whether maybe they knew it, maybe they didn't. But the key would be um, whatever they're creating now, to look for that same catalyst, and it's not going to be as simple as the action, the renting of the movie, Action Jacksonation. It might be something else. So, it's there's these when you sometimes you see that you mix these chemical cocktails. You did it in elementary school, and you add just one thing, and you make a volcano in elementary school. You add one little chemical, and the thing just overflows, or with lava in your little science experiment in elementary school. There's probably They probably, when what happened with 1918 was probably similar, you know. See, you have combination, you have a bacteria introduced, you have World War One. Just some V comes, whatever you believe that to be, that ain't going to get it done in terms of what happened in 1918. They know what the catalyst is, and who knows if they're going to try to recreate a catalyst. So the key is to look for it and to find out what it is, and at least, you know, keep thinking about it in this way, I guess. So, guys, thanks for listening to this. We'll keep talking about this in the future, and hopefully the hobo code was presented accurately. So this will load. Oh, and guys, I'm not gonna, in terms of just reminding you at the end now that part two of last week's is on Freevoice now. I'm not gonna every single time. I'm not gonna pop over and say, it's there. I mean, you just if you signed up at no hobo code, it's just nohobocode.com, and you give your name and email, you get an alert. So in a few weeks from now, I'm not going to. I'll pop in if we change things. Right now, we're doing it just on the weekends. But if things change, I'll pop in. But I probably won't continue to pop in to tell you. You can just go over there and see what's new. So thanks for listening to this, guys. This is an important topic. We'll talk about more, I'm sure, going forward.